I did a little bit of research about you, and first of all, thank you for your amazing service. I understand that you are approaching 100 years old. Is that right?
In May.
Oh, okay. Well, a century is a very important milestone for most people, so congratulations. You've been married for 72 years?
Correct.
Wow, that's an achievement. I'm very impressed by that. So just to give people a little bit of background about you, viewers, you served on the USS, and you have to correct me with my pronunciation, the USS Salamaua. Is that right?
Good. You got it right.
Good. And you flew the F4F, the Grumman Wildcat. And a couple of things that I wanted to point out to viewers before we carry on with your story and we get into some detailed questions. You survived an intense kamikaze attack or series of attacks in January 1945 while you were aboard the USS Salamaua. And in fact, the Salamaua was heavily damaged in, I believe, the last successful kamikaze attack of the Philippines campaign. And you also survived a rather serious typhoon in June of 1945. Yeah. And last but not least, having gone through all that, you were in Tokyo Bay for the Japanese surrender in September of 1945.
Correct.
Wow. Well, there's can I ask you, without any further ado, can I ask you where you were when Pearl Harbor was attacked? How did you hear about Pearl Harbor?
I was in Springfield, Massachusetts, at a friend's house watching a football game. When the news came on, I had no idea where this place was. And then they said that we've been attacked by a foreign country. Later, it came on Japanese, and a lot of damage, but we will recover and we'll continue to keep you fast of what's going on. So that's how I heard it at a football game.
Who won the football game?
You know, I don't even remember.
So, why did you become a flyer? What was it about flying that appealed to you?
Well, as a youngster, I used to love to see planes and go to an airport hoping somebody would give me a ride. They never did. And so when I graduated from high school, I said, I don't think I'm going to look good in brown if the Army gets me. I'm going to apply to the Navy. I did, but the Navy said we had 4 years of college. I only had 2, but they said, we've just made a change. If you will pass an exam and a physical, we will put you on and make you a Navy aviator. So I passed the exam and started my education, and I had a great training in the Navy that was excellent, and I'm so glad I'm still here to talk about it.
Well, where did you train? Was it Pensacola?
No, I got all the end of training was in Pensacola. Everything else was a bit outside. I went to three universities and 5 naval air stations before I went to Pensacola.
Right.
So I moved around a little bit in my training and then graduated and got my wings in Pensacola.
What was the toughest part of the training? What was the hardest thing for you training?
I think the hardest thing was probably making sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, because we had a lot of different planes, and I'd get used to one and then I'd be sent on to another station for a different plane. And I want to make sure that I was doing the right thing, using the right instruments, and making sure we got back to the station again.
What was the most challenging plane that you flew?
Most challenging was probably in the Pacific. We didn't know where we were because our airplanes in those days were not like today. You had no idea. You had knew how high you were, what speed you were, what temperature was, but we weren't sure whether they were 5 years out, 2 years out, and we were just always hoping that we'd get the right information and come back. The most important thing I think was I had one thing that engine failure, and I had to go into the water in the Pacific, and I put my got my passport out or my book and sat there. I was lucky there was some escort around our book, and they came and picked me up. Tradition in the Navy, if you're picked up by somebody and you have to give them ice cream before they can tip you out. So a carrier made a lot of ice cream. The small planes didn't make ice cream. So before they would pull me over, they sent a thing over, said, put the ice cream in. The ice cream went in. They sent back a jug, and I got on this thing and shoot it back to the camp to the carrier. And that was my most exciting things of that day.
Right. Just back up a little bit, if we may. You joined the Salamaua in December of 1944. Can you take us through the early days of your service aboard that escort carrier?
I'm not sure I heard your first part.
When did you first join the escort carrier?
I think you gave the date right there, didn't you?
Was it November 1944?
Yeah.
Right. And where did you join the escort carrier?
In Guam.
Right. Okay. And what was your role when you joined? What was your role when you joined the
pilot,
right,
fighter pilot, and my ensign. I was an ensign at the time, very wet behind the ears, but we had a great crew, great telekeepers, good airplanes, and we came through fine. My biggest challenge, I think, was making sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
Because I was young at the day.
What was your first action? When did you first see action? When were you first in combat?
After we went aboard in Guam, we were out 2 days, and then we had some contact. And sometimes it was aviation, sometimes it was a submarine, sometimes it was a battleship on the front. We kept each one and made sure we had a right protection, make sure we were being covered. And the biggest thing was when you're flying, we hope our ship is not damaged because we know how we're going to get back and where we're going to land.
I think people can't quite imagine what it was like to be landing on a carrier in the winter of 1944-45. What were the big challenges for you as a pilot in taking off and landing on a carrier? Because we're talking about the very early days of that kind of naval aviation.
Yeah.
What was the biggest?
The ship had to have 25 knots of wind across the deck before we could land. The airplane or the ship went 19 miles. So we had to put some into the wind or speed it up, because if you couldn't land if you didn't have 25 knots of speed. The person that's most important in my life as a flyer was what I call a landing signal officer. He was down at the end with 2 flags telling me I'm too high, too low, too slow, too fast. And if you watch him, he would take you in, and before you know it, boom, you're on the left. We had 3 wires we had to catch with a tailgate. If you got one of those, you're okay. If you didn't, you were in trouble. Because they had a crash thing that came up. If you didn't catch one of the screws, you go into that, and that was bad. Your ship was gone, and you're probably sent to the back someplace to repent. The LSO, landing signal officer, was probably the best friend you could have. he made sure you're going to get in and he made sure you're going to land properly. And we lived by him.
Were there times when you thought you weren't going to make it safely back to the carrier? Times when
Yes.
tell us about that.
Well, when you're on crew, you're out and you're wondering when the next plane is going to come at you, high, low, round. And also you said, when am I going to get home? Do I have enough fuel to get back? So I think the most thing that happened to me when I had the engine failure, I went into the water. And that's when it was picked up by a destroyer. But most of the time, I had great faith in my ship and my plane and the guys that were flying with me. You never flew alone. You always had at least 4 or 5 pilots with you. So I'm hard to pick out a hard thing. I think every day was a challenge. And every day, big sigh of relief when we landed on the ship.
Big sigh of relief when you hit all 3 wires. Yeah, that must have been. Yeah. Which of your fellow flying friends, I'm sure they became very good friends. Who do you remember most fondly? I mean, tell us about some of the guys that you flew with.
We generally flew in a group of 6 planes. The senior officer front, and then the rest of us behind him in a formation. And we would stay pretty much in the formation until somebody came and start to attack us, and then we were on our own. Go out, get your own plane, protect yourself, and if you get shot down, you got to make sure you get out of that cockpit and get into your carrier, take your thing off the. That was the biggest challenge. Make sure we're living right, working right, and hope we're shooting straight. We had 3 50 calibers on each side.
Whoa. Huh. That's a lot of fire. That's a lot of firepower.
A lot of firepower.
Did you yourself shoot down any Japanese planes?
No, not in the air.
Right.
To be an ace, you have to shoot from the air. If I've got plenty of them on the ground, but that doesn't count. You can't be an ace from that because your enemy was not an enemy, it was a shot. I took quite a few of those from the various places we'd go into because, first of all, the Navy was only covering places that were ready to be entered by military men.
Right.
We'd go in and soft them up. And the first thing we do is make sure we ruin their oh boy. Excuse me, I'll put my teeth back in again. The airline, if you can't find a place to land, we know we were okay. So we try to get that first, and then we'd work on the ships that were placed, and then the buildings that were there. And we had escorts of 6 of us at a time, and 3 or 2 would go down. That was up. 3 or 2 more would go down. And we always made sure we came back and make sure that our wingman came back too.
So were you ever in a dogfight?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, it was the Japanese ship that was better at high altitude, better than our planes. We would play better at 20,000, and they wanted us to go up to 40,000. So we wouldn't take the bite. We'd say, no, if you want to fight, come on down. And so they would come down. The dogfight was considering of getting behind him because if you're in front of him, he's going to get you. So you're always trying to get behind him. A lot of turning, a lot of up and down, and make sure your hand was on your machine gun. The best part is if you shot them down, you know you had a good one. I never had the enjoyment of knocking one down in the air. I got plenty of them on the ground, but not too many in the air.
Did you ever have a Japanese plane in your sights? Did you ever almost get one?
No, only it didn't knock it out of the air. I caught smoke coming out of it, and I said, that guy's got to go someplace.
Right.
So we let him go.
What sustained you during your time in service? Did you think you were going to come home? Did you pray? What gave you strength above all when you were in combat?
Okay, two things: great faith in your training, great faith in your airplane, great faith with your pilot or passing with your crewmen, and then a few prayers. No time did I feel that I was not going to come home. I just felt that the good Lord is looking out for me. I've got a good plane, good people with me, and I think we're going to survive.
What was so good about your plane, the Wildcat? What was superb about it? I know that you visited a museum recently, and you wanted to jump back into the cockpit. But what was so good about the Wildcat?
First of all, it was very maneuverable, and number two, it had a great engine.
Right.
And we had good ability. We had in the wing we had. But oh boy,
You had the 50 cal.
yeah, we had 3 on each side, and then we had also oh boy,
That's okay. It was a very well armed plane.
it was.
You could do it on a straight.
I'm sorry, I'm missing some of these things here, but it's AGE. You know what that is?
No.
Almost 100. So bear with me, please.
No, it's okay. You've got oh my God, you've got 44 years on me. So but please, thank you for being with us. What makes a great fighter pilot? I mean, you saw guys at their best. You were tested to the limit. What makes a really good fighter pilot?
First of all, faith in your plane.
Right.
You know what it's going to do. You know what you're supposed to do to make it work. And so the best thing you can do is say, I know my plane is good. I just got to make sure I'm going to steer it and protect it and make sure it brings me home. The plane is your best enemy, best friend you ever had.
Right. Superb eyesight. Do you have really good eyesight still? Did you have fantastic eyesight?
You have to have good eyesight. Yeah.
Right.
A lot of people that went to training just didn't make it because of the airfight came out. You have to know what you're looking at, not only your instruments in your plane, but outside what's going on.
Right.
So you keep your eyes going 24 hours when you're in the plane.
Did that mean that you had to twist your neck a lot? Did you have a special scarf? How did you manage that? Because you're constantly looking around, aren't you?
Constantly looking down, up,
right,
and out each side. Your neck was always going.
Right. In the RAF,
if you're up an edge, so you had to have gas mask on, which limited you a little bit. At
right,
10,000 feet, we would go for gas,
right,
oxygen. And below 10, we didn't need it, which was always good. So then you had more visibility, more agility.
When I mentioned the word kamikaze, what's your reaction to that word, that very powerful word, kamikaze?
Kamikaze is a person that's going to kill you. When the Japanese ran out of gasoline and planes, they would send the person up on a one-way trip with a burial costume on, and he would aim at our planes, aim at our ships. And one hit the back of ours, and the elevator that takes a plane up and down, exploded. It killed 14 people in our down below. And the guy has his burial suit on. We noticed it. So he knew he was on a one-way trip.
Wow.
So when you say kamikaze, we all shuddered a little bit. It's like, I hope he's not aiming at our plane, at our ship.
let's go back to January 1945, and you were in the Silver Sea, and the kamikazes are coming thick and fast. I think that it was maybe the 4th of January 1945 when kamikazes first attacked your escort carrier. And then the time when you were actually hit and damaged badly that you just mentioned was, I believe that was the 13th of January 1945.
Yeah.
Now, the guy that hit you, believing in divine wind, there were two 250-kilogram bombs that came with him. Those did an enormous amount of damage. Can you describe what it was like to be there with kamikazes screaming towards you? It must have been terrifying.
The kamikaze started early in the morning before we had taken off on most of our day activities. So all of us were down in the ready room,
right,
where we get our instructions and sit and make sure we know what's going on. And we heard the loud noise when it came into the elevator and went down into the ship. We said something's wrong, and then the explosion. So we knew we had a problem. And they told us, stay where you are. We want to know where you're going to be. Don't be running up and down and getting in trouble. So we sat in the ready room most of the time, never got down to see what the damage was until later. But we lost a lot of good people.
So you, from that one kamikaze attack on the 13th of January, 15 crewmen were killed and 88 were injured.
Yes.
Did you have any respect for kamikaze pilots? What were your views at the time? Have they changed? How did you guys feel about that kind of suicide?
I think the
mission?
kamikaze was later in the chair coming out of Japan. Earlier in Japan, we had great fighters. They were well-trained, good planes, but the kamikaze said, you're not going to come back. You're doing this for the emperor and for the. So all I had to do is make sure I can steer the plane and get it into a place that's going to hit it and damage it. I don't think they were good at pilots at all. One-way trip, you don't have to be a good pilot. You know where you're going.
Right. You were attacked during January 1945. You were attacked almost daily until the 13th of January. And I believe even after that, by kamikaze planes. Do you remember the first time that you saw a kamikaze? What went through your mind?
Well, it's the first time we saw them, we didn't know it was a one-way trip kamikaze,
right,
or one was going to do something and then get out of there. They didn't have a sign on it saying, I'm a kamikaze. We knew it was a Japanese airplane. They'd come down low. We had 4 ships around us. They would be shooting. We'd have some guns on our ship. We'd be shooting. So we knew that one of them was either going to hit us or we were going to hit them. And if they came in large numbers, it was tough to get them all.
So did you actually watch a kamikaze come towards you? And did you see the fire from your ship?
No, I was on. The only time I saw the kamikaze close was when I was sitting in the ready room and we heard the big ball, went down and looked at it.
Right.
I saw them off in the distance quite often, but never too close to our ship.
Right. Okay. So you, after the kamikaze attack, the escort carrier was taken for repairs. Can you tell us a little bit about how you spent the rest of the winter of 1945? What happened after that kamikaze attack on the 13th of January?
They had to send the ship back to the Philippines, complete correction of all the damage. We were stationed at Guam on the ground. The B-17s and B-29s were every night went to Tokyo and came back again. Quite often they'd come back with damage and very slow, and the Japanese were very quick to jump in behind them and try to get them. We would take off an hour before they were coming in and go out and meet them. 6 of us. So we would be covering the poor plane that was badly damaged, going very slow, and a bad target. We made sure if the Japanese were coming, we knocked them out of there and get them out of it so that our man could get back to his station. We had good luck in keeping them safe. Thank God, all of them came out okay.
What were your views about the Japanese? You were, how old were you while you were flying at that stage? You were
20, 21.
How did you feel about the enemy?
Well, never met one personally. I had no idea. I did respect them early because they were good pilots. Later, kamikaze, I knew they were just the poor guys who could have get one-way trip. My conviction was what they're well trained. They're a tough enemy. You better watch out or they'll get you. I had respect for them.
Right. We have a question along this same theme from William Chrysler, and he asks, did the fighting get tougher? Did things get more desperate the closer you got to the Japanese mainland, the home islands?
Okay. We were with I can't remember the number of ships. It was on the way to Tokyo, heading north. We were doing coverage up above them, and no matter what part of the thing you'd look out, ships after ships after ships, all heading for Tokyo. All kinds. They're very slow, and we were covering up above so nobody could come in and bomb them and the Japanese were running so low on gasoline, they were protecting it, and they were not touching them too much that far out. But when we got in closer, they would look at us more closely. So I would respect the good Japanese pilots. I didn't respect the kamikaze because I knew what they were thinking of, or they didn't know what they were thinking of.
How many naval aviators from World War II do you know today? How many of you guys are still alive?
That's almost hard for me to answer because all I know is the ones that are on my ship and what I am probably only 2 left, including myself. Not from accident or just age, because I'm going to be 100 in 3 months. And if you have good health, you're going to make it. If you don't have good health, you're going to go in the 80s or 90s. So I've been blessed.
We have a question here again from Mr. Chrysler. He says, he asks, have you met any Japanese veterans?
No. When we went ashore, the first thing they told us was, don't make eye contact, don't eat or drink anything, and make sure your gun is handy. So we were parked in the bay, right in the shadow of the Missouri, for about 3 weeks, maybe a month. And then they finally said, they're not going to attack us anymore. It's okay to let those things come back. So all those ships turned around and went back. Another big thing, they've had so many of them that were slow, 5-6 knots an hour. We were going 19. So they said, we're going to take your ship and put some carrier things on so that we'll make places for these people to sleep and get them off those slow ships. So we find to put our planes up on the top, build 3-tier sleeping pillars down below, and we had about 200 Marines and sailors on our ship heading back to the United States.
I want to back up a little bit here because, there was a very famous typhoon House's typhoon in 1944 that was enormously destructive. But in June of 1945, as you were moving towards the Japanese home islands, you were in a typhoon called Typhoon Connie. Am I right? I think it was called Typhoon Connie. And from the task force that you were a part of, 46 planes were destroyed by that typhoon. Do you remember the typhoon?
I remember the typhoon. It was a disaster. We didn't know sure whether we would make it.
Really? Tell us more about that.
Okay. The ocean was climbing over the top of our ship. Place
Wow.
where the plane waves were coming up there. We were losing control of some of our things that steer the ship. We knew we're getting low in fuel, and we knew we didn't know how to get in and out of the thing. Those days, they had no idea where the damage was. If we could see out far enough, we'd say, okay, it looked cloudy here, turn right. We had no kind of good things like that. So one thing I mentioned, we were not sure we were going to make it. We had a padre aboard who was hearing confessions, and the line was pretty long outside his cabin. And he got seasick about every other person. He would say, excuse me, and run to the head, come back, and hear another call. I felt sorry for him. I was in the line. I want to make sure I had the right thing. And he survived, I survived, and somebody was looking out for us.
How long did the typhoon last? I mean, how long were you guys thinking that you might not make it?
Probably 24 hours.
Oh, are those the longest 24 hours of your life?
Yes. Yeah.
When did you realize that the typhoon was abating, that you stood a chance of living?
Well, when the waves stopped coming over the carrier, we knew we were in a better position. And we knew that we could, if we had our steering in the room, we knew we could make it through it if we were out of the eye. And the eyes were big, and we're in them sometimes a day and a half. But you knew you're going to try to get out of it. And if you did get out of it, you're going to be okay.
So you were in the eye of the typhoon without any kind of control, just at the whim and mercy of the gods.
That's right. No,
wow.
No control. The sea is unbelievable how big it is when it gets that sand going. If you get water going over the top of your ship, you know you've got a problem.
So how high were those waves then?
Well, our ship was 22 feet above the water. They were going over the top of that and up on where the concrete. They were probably 40, 50-foot waves.
Oh.
Unbelievable.
So how did you yourself get through that? What did you grab onto something? For 24 hours, what did you do apart from pray and hope? What did you do?
Most of all, you stayed in your room, kept a hold of your bed. We had 2 decks of bed, and you grab a hold of that and just lay there. You tried to get out and get some food, but half the time you couldn't walk down the stairways. So it was tough.
Wow.
And we were not sure we were going to make it.
Wow. Well, I'm very glad you did.
I am too.
Tell us about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When did you hear about the atomic bombs being dropped?
I didn't hear your part.
When did you hear about the atomic bombs? When did you hear about Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Good day. I was flying that day, and we had a successful trip, did a lot of damage on the ground, came back, went into the ready room, and they said, there's something going on. Something happened. A bomb has been dropped on Hirosaki. Tremendous damage. They don't know what kind of a bomb it was. We don't know if it was our bomb or somebody else's. But then the next day, the news came out. It was the atomic bomb. Tremendous damage. They checked with Japan. do you want to stop the fighting now? They said, absolutely not. We are going to fight this till the end. A week later, we put another one down. And same thing, tremendous damage, huge killing. We went to again, talked to them, and they said, yes, we can't. They had no idea how many bombs we had. We only had 2. But they thought we had a whole load of them. So they said, we can't take it. We know you'll kill us. Sue for peace. That's when we knew that we had it made.
When did you find out about the formal Japanese surrender?
Probably when we knew the war was over, we could open up communications much better.
Right.
So we were getting constant radio saying that, yes, we're going to go in on a certain day in Japan, sign the peace things, and just keep staying where you are until we tell you where you're going to go. And that's when we heard we were going to be sent up into the harbor in the shadow of the Missouri and watch that thing happen. And it was a great day. We knew we had it made.
What was the reaction of your fellow crew members and pilots to hearing that the war was over? What was it? Exultation, exhaustion, a combination of emotions? What were people's reactions?
Well, 2 things: we knew we won. Secondly, said, where can we find a drink? And third, all of our good friends are still here and we're going to make it. Speaking of the drink, I'll tell you a story. We had a physician on the bed. When you came down from a trip, you could go into this ready room and he'd say, what kind of a day was it? Good. He'd give you a little tiny bottle that you get on the airplane, 2 sips. One day, one of my friends said, don't say good, say it was tough. What for? Well, you'll get 2 bottles. So when I go down, I say, oh, it's tough today. Boy, they're really all over us. Okay, 2 bottles. So my friend, the LSO, I'd always make sure to give him one of my bottles because if he got me down, I knew I was okay. I think the theory was that we made it. We beat them. It was a tough fight. We lost some good friends, but pretty soon we're going to be on our way home.
Did you lose good friends?
I did.
Can you tell us about some of them?
I want to tell you about burial. The ships had no way to keep a body more than 12 hours. And then it was burial at sea. I'll still see that. I still hear that. They had 4 men would take the body on a slab, bring it upstairs, lay it on the ground, and the padre would say some friends, some prayers. The rest of us who were not on duty would stand around on a kilt. They'd pick the thing up, put it on the grill, and then they would say, God bless you, and they tipped it, and the body went into the water. Had a white thing on, and the last thing we saw was going down. The ship made the exact measurement that day, so that it was part of the record. And some families, we understood, wanted that record. They wanted to know where their beloved was gone. And I don't know if any of them were out in the Pacific, but at least they know it closed the picture for them.
How many burials at sea did you witness?
Well, with the kamikaze thing, we had 24. None of my pilot friends were involved in that. It was the crew that went down below that was all damaged by that. But the thing that hurt us was when you knew one of your friends is not coming back. Or his plane crashed on the plane. The plane went over, but they saved the body. So we had some close friends went through that burial. It's something I'll never forget.
Can you tell us a little bit about a really good friend or two that you lost during the war? I mean, do you often remember them?
The plane I lost?
No, the friends that you lost.
Oh, yeah. Some of them I knew good. Some of them were my wingmen. Others were, you'd see them at dinner. If we went ashore, which we didn't go ashore much, you'd go and get a beer with them. Knew their families, knew their parents, knew how many children. So some of them you got pretty close with. And when they went, you really know you had a problem because one of your best friends is gone. Some of them I didn't know that well, but I was conscious and respected what they went through.
How does that make you feel as a proud American when you see people that you really care about, that you've been in a deadly fight with, when you see them being buried at sea, when you see that American flag on their coffin? How does that make you feel as an American today, and how did it make you feel back then?
Well, I think two things. Number one, I hope I'm not the next one. Number two, I'm so proud of what they've done, and I'm so proud of our country. We never knew from what time you took off and came back whether you're going to make it or not. It was a daily thing. I was fortunate. I came back. I came all the way home. Not a lot of my good friends didn't do it.
When you got home, when did you see your parents? Do you remember your mum hugging you? What happened when you got home?
Well, one thing, when we went under the Golden Gate Bridge, we knew we were home. We knew we won. And we went up to Alameda and got off the ship. There was those days you didn't fly, you went on the train. And I think it was 3 days to go back to the east. I lived in Connecticut. Telephones were not used much. First of all, he said it's too expensive. And we didn't have the little thing you have in the hand now. So my parents, I don't think they knew I was coming home until maybe I knocked on the door.
Wow. And what was the reaction?
A lot of communications were not good.
Do you still remember that moment? I mean,
You
must have been looking forward to that moment for a long time.
My both parents were pretty age. I was the youngest one, and I think they were not sure whether I'd ever coming home. But when I went through the front door, they knew I was there. A lot of hugs.
Yeah. What did you do after the war? We have a question from, I'm going to mention her name, from Julie Ornelas. I think that's the pronunciation. Julie wants to know what you did after you came home from the war.
I went to college for 4 years.
Right.
Under the GI Bill. Best bill ever happened to this country.
Best thing that ever happened, you could argue.
Yes. And it made people that we couldn't afford to go to school. It made congressional people that we would never be doctors, never engineers. And I went to 4 years of college, graduated, and went to work with an insurance company because I majored in insurance.
Right.
I worked in Hartford, Connecticut, which had a lot of insurance companies. So my first job was with an insurance company, and I thought I was going to make the rest of my career, which I did.
Right. Have you been to DC, to the memorial? Have you been to visit us in DC?
I put the peanut thing on for the Navy several times. I do want to tell you that I was recalled to Korea.
Oh, okay.
I was married, one child, working, new job, went into the hotel or the park where we lived. And the mail was there. I looked at it. I said, oh, some guy's got a big envelope here. I wonder what he is. I looked, it was my name. I took it upstairs, didn't open until the next morning. Congratulations, we want you back again. So I went down to Pensacola for a year and a half, instructed young kids how to be good pilots. Then the war was ended, and I went home back to my job. I had a child while I was down there, and the bill was $8. That's the best thing that ever happened to me in the Navy.
So how long did you stay in the reserves for?
I'm retired, 20 years service.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for what you did in World War II, obviously, but thank you for your service afterwards. A lot of people forget that people didn't just leave the U.S. military in 1945. They stayed in service.
Some of them stayed. Some said, I can't take any more of this.
Right.
I looked at the future. I said, I could earn a pension from this thing. I have no idea what the insurance industry is going to give me. So
right.
I said, a Navy pension would be good if I get 20 years in, which I did.
Right.
Still working on that pension.
Did you fly as for fun at any point in your life? I mean, after the war, did you fly again for fun?
No.
Just always in the military.
In the military, when I went back in Pensacola, I was teaching. I didn't fly.
Right.
We put a lot of them in the what I call a meta thing, and it's airplane on wheels. They don't fly, and we did make sure. I said, make sure you're doing this right, doing that right. So I was doing a lot of training, but not up in the air.
So when was the last time that you flew in a fighter plane?
I went 4 years of college, and I went to reserves 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. And the last flight I had, I flew a jet.
Right.
I've always been flying. It's F9, a dual jet from Brooklyn, New York. Worst place to fly because there's so many airports. Too many airports up there. So we were very cautious when we were flying. But it was like driving a Cadillac versus a Ford. The ship was so fast, so maneuverable. I wished I could have stayed on a little longer and done some more of it.
So it was fun, yeah? It was
Yes,
a lot of fun.
very much.
What kind of G-forces were you under when you were in combat? You didn't have a G-suit. You didn't have a G-suit like they have today.
No,
if you watch Top Gun and watch Tom Cruise, they have G-suits. You didn't have a G-suit.
No.
So you were pulling enormous forces in a dogfight. In a turn, you were pulling what, 4 or 5 G?
4 or 5 Gs, and a lot of times you're made sure you're going to stay in your seat because make sure the thing was on tight. A lot of maneuvers, and your head was spinning, and it was tough.
Right. You must have been utterly exhausted after you came back to the carrier.
Today I got 2 bottles.
Right. We have a question here. A lot of people asking questions. Everybody, I think, very, very feeling very fortunate. Certainly I am that you're with us today. It's a rare thing indeed for us to share a Saturday morning with a World War II naval aviator. Huge thrill for me. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
What advice or words of wisdom would you give to high school students, for example, or young people today? Do you have anything that you would like them to take away from your lessons that you learned in World War II?
2 thoughts: peacetime and wartime, totally different.
Right.
Right now we're on peacetime, and so if you're not sure you want to be in the military, do your college education and think about working rather than going into the military. If your parents are in the military and they want you, give it 100%, and pick one that you like. If you can fly, fine. If you can't, but our military is well trained, well thought about, and I would not discourage anybody from going into the military.
At Friends, we've been going into high schools in the last year or so, and it's quite amazing the reaction that we get from students when we start talking about you and your generation. And we point out that, if they're 17, 18 now, that was the age that you were when Pearl Harbor was attacked.
Yeah.
And when you say to them, look, you might have to one day do what that so-called greatest generation did, They look at you, oh my God, really? We might have to do something. But you were incredibly young. People forget that. You were very young. 20 years old is still very young. It's a lot of responsibility, a lot of stress. Did you grow up fast? Grew up really fast, yeah?
I think I had an older brother that was in the military. I had a sister that was a nurse in the military. And I came along and I said, I'll make sure I'm going to be the tail end here, but I want to do something good about it. So I put everything into it I could. And flying was my key thing. I knew there were going to be some exposures. And of course, then when we went into war, I knew we were going to have I would say, don't stay away from the military. Military is still good, and they well train you, and you make a good salary.
What would you like young people to learn about their country most? What would you like young people to care about in terms of serving their country?
I'd say be respectable about this country. Don't hesitate to go to peace, to try to get work, elect to something, some jobs. If you can work for the government, fine. If not, private stuff is good. And I hope that if you're going to, you have a family, best thing in the life is family. And they're going to look to you for do a lot of advice and counsel, and you can do that.
Was World War II your finest hour? Are you proudest of what you did in World War II when you look back on your long life? Is that the thing that you're proudest of?
I am. My other brothers and sisters always said, you know, you went to war, and I don't think your mother even knew what you were doing. The radios, there was no television those early days, radio. And the guys would come on in the night say, oh, if you have a son in the Pacific, it's a bad night. And my mother didn't know what it was. I think he's in the Pacific, but I think he's okay. So my sister's just like 103 years old.
Whoa.
And she was a nurse up in Massachusetts where there was injured fellows would come over. And she did work them up there she was a second lieutenant. I had an older brother, second lieutenant. I come in as an ensign. So we were a military family.
Well, so we're about to run out of time. We've got a minute or so left. We have another author joining us at the top of the hour at 11. I just wanted to say on behalf of friends and the people watching, thank you so much. You've been amazing, not just today, obviously, but thank you so much for what you did in World War II. Enormous respect, enormous gratitude. We can never thank you enough. What would you leave us with? What message would you leave us with about the importance of World War II?
World War II was a thing that changed this country. Not only the people who were in it, but the ones that went to college because of it. I would say respect your country, respect the community you live in, and if it's your desire, run for office, be involved, use your experiences to help. And if you have a family, support your kids, help them, and be an image for them.
Well, thank you so much, sir. You're an inspiration to us all. We wish you the very best. We'd love to see you whenever you come to DC. We'd love to meet up and take you to the.
I'll do that next time.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all people listening.